Chapter 13. What Can't Be Stolen. Killing people, even the people in your head, is wrong, said Franklin to the mirror in his office. The mirror didn't respond, but he could only imagine how Helena would. This thought had kept him up most of the night, and after a lot of reflection, he had decided that William was right. If you think about ethics too long, you do risk exploding your brain. He was practicing what he would say to her later that afternoon, and he didn't have the slightest idea as to how he would tell her that he couldn't authorize the extraction of her personalities. And some of your personalities aren't too bad. Kay says she makes really great homemade apple pie. Am I interrupting something? Said a voice from behind him. Franklin turned around, expecting to see Mr. Hafts early for his appointment. But instead of a chubby man with scales, he saw a slender man with orange skin and bat wings. Franklin folded his arms in disgust. Rajal Sharak was the last thing he needed right now. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Sharak, Franklin said. Sharak's wings folded behind him, and he bent over in a graceful bow. I'm sure you'll understand if I tell you Rajal Sharak is not my real name. Franklin ignored him and activated the speakerphone on his desk. Bethany, I specifically told you not to let in any Nixots without my express permission. I know, came the voice of his secretary. But Mr. Sharak said it was the most important thing I'd ever do, and I just couldn't throw away a chance like that. Sharak smiled. You'd better hang on to her, Franklin. She's a natural. Franklin instantly understood. Bethany was acting exactly as he had when he was affected by Grothman's thretinoidian persuasion powers. So, you don't put all the powers you steal up for auction, Franklin said. Of course not. Some of them come in handy for stealing more. Sharak continued. It's ironic, isn't it? You never could read my mind, even when you did have telepathy. But now I can read yours. You don't like me very much, do you? Look, as much as I'm enjoying this little reunion, we're both wasting each other's time, said Franklin. He picked up a stack of blank computer paper, set it down in front of him, and thumbed through it as though it were important paperwork. I don't have any more powers for you to steal, so why don't you run along and try to con a Yivanox or something? Don't you know anything? Love powers are so last year. No, what I'm after is brand new. It'll be the hottest commodity since heat vision. Franklin reached under his desk. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have anything you want. Franklin pointed a bottle of window cleaner at the Nixot and smiled confidently. Sharak laughed. For a minute there, I thought you were reaching for a weapon. Don't you research your power's weaknesses before you steal them? Franklin asked. As Franklin sprayed Sharak with several blasts of window cleaner, the door opened and Mr. Hafts walked inside. Am I interrupting something? Hafts asked. Sharak wiped his now drenched button-down shirt. As a matter of fact, you're not, Sharak said, inching closer to Hafts. I'm here to see you. Sharak held out his hand, and Hafts pulled away, just as he had when Franklin had tried to shake hands with him. I don't shake hands, Hafts said. He looked at Franklin, who was still pointing his bottle of window cleaner at Sharak like an anxious cop. Dr. Bryce, if this is a bad time, shake my hand, said Sharak impatiently. Hafts looked confused. No, he said. What's wrong, Sharak? Asked Franklin. Lost your touch? Sharak threw his outstretched hand down at his side in frustration. He walked behind Franklin, leaned over his shoulder, and whispered, How did you know that would happen? 2 words. Nitsu Trivisknot. Oh, and don't read the English version. It's worthless. Franklin was relieved, not just because Sharak couldn't use his thretinoidian persuasion against Hafts, but also because he knew Sharak's telepathy wouldn't work now either. There was nothing worse than having Rajal Sharak digging around in his head for secrets. Sharak's wings batted angrily. He pulled out a small white envelope from his pocket. I had hoped we could conduct this transaction without incident, but I suppose I'll have to do this the more reckless and less thought-out way. Franklin knew exactly what Sharak was trying to do, and he held back a laugh. You're wasting your time, Franklin said. Mr. Hafts doesn't have any superpowers. Sharak narrowed his eyes and held his right arm in front of himself, spreading his fingers wide. He shot a wave of neon green energy from his palm that sent Franklin flying up against the opposite wall. Mr. Hafts, "Why are you here?" Chirac asked him, leaving Franklin lying in a daze on the floor. "I think the question is, why are you here?" said Hast. "All right, I'll go first. I'm here to take your curse away from you." Chirac fumbled with the piece of paper in his hands. Franklin moaned and rubbed his bruised side as he tried to stand up. "How do you know about that?" Hast asked, wide-eyed. "I have connections all over the multiverse. I know about a lot of people's secrets, especially about the special powers they keep to themselves. I know yours has ruined your life." Franklin finally stood up and limped toward them. "Don't listen to him, Mr. Hast. He's not here to help you. He thinks he can steal your ability and sell it for a profit." "Is that true?" asked Mr. Hast. "Dr. Bryce's opinion of my business practices is not the issue here." "Why should you care what my intentions are? If you no longer want the burden of being a dimension, then I can help you." Hast shook his head and clenched his fists. "But you're going to help me whether I want it or not, aren't you?" "Please, I only want—" "Oh, no," said Hast. The chubby Jexerite stood just inches away from Chirac and stared straight up at him with his hands on his hips. "You might be taller, you might be stronger, and you might have a little piece of paper that steals things, but you don't intimidate me. What makes you think I won't use my power right now?" "The fact that I can give you the one thing you've always wanted. A normal life." Franklin began to feel a slight breeze across his neck. "Is it getting chilly in here, or is it just me?" he asked aloud. "You're not interested in what I want," Half said. "You want to exploit me. You're just like everyone else. If they don't hate me, they want to dissect me." The breeze grew stronger. Franklin looked at Hast and saw that he was reddening in the face. Franklin grabbed a hold of his desk. "If they don't call me a freak, they want me for their school mascot, and you want to call my condition a gift and use it for your own benefit." Chirac threw his hands in the air and let the piece of paper fly. "All right, I give up." The paper ripped and folded itself until it was a perfect cube and was hovering in midair, just like the one he'd used only a few months earlier to steal Franklin's telepathy. "You're absolutely right, and your powers will be mine before you even have a chance to use them." Before long, the breeze became a strong wind. Papers flew off of Franklin's desk and spun about the room like they'd been swept up by a cyclone. Franklin's wavy hair ruffled in the wind, and he shielded his face with the hand he wasn't using to hold himself steady. He caught a glance at the paper cube, which was vibrating violently but wasn't being affected by the wind at all. Franklin wondered just what kind of paper it was made of. Hast practically barked in his anger. "Then let's just see what's faster. You're a little toy or a dimensional vortex." As the wind blew even stronger, Chirac jumped into the air and flapped his wings against it, trying to make his way to the door. He looked back at the cube and suddenly appeared very concerned. "What's wrong?" Franklin yelled. "Don't you have any powers to keep you from getting sucked into a vortex?" He was being only half sarcastic. A part of him hoped Chirac had some way to stop what Hafs was doing. Franklin didn't want to get sucked into the aperture any more than Chirac did. One by one, the wind picked up Franklin's couch, his glass table, his leather armchairs, and his desk chair, and sent them toward the aperture that was Mr. Hafst. Franklin was amazed to see his furniture seem to disappear just as it reached Hafst's wide stomach. Chirac continued to beat his wings faster and faster until he was panting, but it was no use. He made it to the door handle, but was slowly pulled away from it until he found himself inches away from Hafst. He finally disappeared into the aperture behind the furniture. Franklin was now holding onto the desk with both hands, his legs flailing in the air behind him, but now the heavy oak desk itself was being dragged across the carpet toward Hafs, screeching against the floor as it went. Franklin looked behind him to see Hafs grab the cube out of the air. Before Franklin even had time to wonder what he was doing with the cube, Hafs and the practically empty office disappeared.